Okay, folks. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Oh, we have more joiners. 1408. Who came in on the phone? I'm wondering.
Clara again.
That's Clara.
Is that Clara?
Yes.
Hi, Clara. Okay, I'm going to rename your phone so I can see. Okay, Clara.
Oh, you could do that? That's great.
I can. I just did it. See, now it says Clara. So I can see who's here. It's, I want to make sure we don't have any Zoom bombers, any uninvited problems. Hasn't been a problem for anything I've done, but I keep reading about it.
Zoom bomber, and hopefully he'll be quiet.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a Zoom bomber. Yeah, he's a cute one, though.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay.
I have a suspicion some of the Zoom bombers in the school age are probably school pranksters.
Yeah, there's a lot of pranksters on the internet, believe me.
Smart kids these days, too, can do that, too.
Yeah. So the kids in the class, it's like, oh, this would be fun to do.
Yeah.
So let's start, as I always want to do, I want to start with questions. And this is the period of time as questions seem to increase because people realize that they've got to, try to figure some things out. I was hoping, I think was it Spring yesterday had a specific question about her theme. I was hoping we could do that, but she's not here yet. So we'll wait for that.
I have a question.
Sure. Hi.
I want to know if there is an ideal upload for photos, like an ideal pixel number or whatever.
That's a really good question. That is a good question. It's a common question. It's a common concern. And I'll give you the short answer and the long answer. The short answer is no. The short answer is no. It's just a scale. I mean, it's all relative. So the long answer is this. On the web, smaller files are always better in terms of download speed. And in print, if you're used to, I see that you are a visual designer. So the mindset, I talk a lot about mindset. The mindset of print designers, and most people like years ago came into the web with a print design mindset because that's what there was. It was print. And the web and print are both primarily visual media, but the web less so because it's more complex. There are more factors. So when you come into this with a visual or print mindset, which is pretty much what most people come into it with, because that's what we're mostly familiar with, you define quality in your mind as how good it looks. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's in a visual medium, that's a primary way to define quality of an image or of something visual. How good does it look to the eye? That's how you define the quality, right? There aren't really many other factors. But on the web, there are other factors, and they are arguably, and this is arguable, more important than how good it looks is how fast the site loads. How responsive it is in terms of, is there a lag? Do people click on something, wait for another page to load? I mean, does it get, another way of asking your question is how slow is too slow? You see what I'm saying? And there's no like hard and fast dividing line. It's just a question of where on the scale you want to be. So you have to balance the factors of how good something looks with how large the file is, which translates to download speed. So think about the factors. There's download speed, and then there's also bandwidth use, which comes into play with a lot of people on, let's say they're looking at your site on a phone, and they have a data plan, and they have limits on the data plan, so it would literally cost them more money if they go to sites that have bigger, larger images, in a sense, right? So you have that as well. And another thing is you want to think about your audience. So if your audience is, if you think your audience of people are fairly well-to-do with high-speed connections and lots of bandwidth, that's one thing. If you think of the fact that your audience may be, or may not be, depending on the audience you're publishing for, they may not have as many resources. They may be on more limited plans. They may have slower bandwidth. Maybe they live rurally and they're on satellite connections, which are extremely slow. I mean, so all these factors you have to think about in your mind. and
Okay.
weigh them. So what I generally do is, the way I look at it is, when I'm going to put an image online, whether it's WordPress or any website, it's the same principle. I look at the image, I bring it into a program like Photoshop or another program that's a graphic editing program. And if you don't have Photoshop, which is, you know, fairly expensive, there are other graphics programs that are reasonable and free that you can use to optimize images. So I bring it into Photoshop, and I usually work in the JPEG realm, because most of the images that we put online are JPEGs, because mostly we're dealing with photographs. Although if you have other kinds of images, they may not be JPEGs, they may be a GIF, a PNG, but the same principles apply in terms of you want to make the file size as small as possible. And with JPEG, it's really a matter of a slider bar. Like, let me, just a second here while I grab an image. I'll keep talking while I'm going to multi-talk here. Let's see. So if you look at the image on the screen, you can see how good it looks. So there's really two factors in optimizing an image for your website. How many pixels, which is the size, the physical size, how big it is on the screen, and how many colors are in the image, because the number of distinct or different colors directly affects the file size. And the fewer different colors in the image, the smaller the file size. That's an interesting concept. So the first factor, the number of pixels, rather than the color of the pixels, that's fairly easy to grasp, because that's simply a calculation. If you figure maybe an average screen has 100 or 110 pixels per inch, then you can kind of estimate or guesstimate about how big that image will look on the screen, if it's 300 pixels wide or 400 pixels wide or 500 pixels wide. Now, that's not a perfect measure, because now we have all kinds of screens with higher resolution. Phone screens, even though they're small, they may have several hundred pixels per inch. But the math is still basically the same. I mean, the more pixels, the larger the image looks physically. So you can kind of see how big an image is going to be on your screen as you're working on it. And you can use that as a visual measure, like, oh yeah, that's about the size I want it to be viewed at. So the first step is you take the number of pixels down. So if you start with an image that's from a digital camera or a scan, it's going to have a lot of pixels. It may be 2,000 pixels wide. It may be more or less. And you don't need 2,000 pixels wide, right? Maybe even people with large desktop screens, maybe that's even more pixels wide than their entire desktop screen. So again, everything varies, but you know, this is all ballparking. So the first thing is you bring it down to, you know, 300, 400, 500 pixels wide, whatever works with the web page that you have in mind. You know, is the image the entire width of your web page? Is it half the size of the web page? You know, as you're estimating, because everything's variable. Yeah. So you bring it down to several hundred pixels wide, for example. Okay, that cuts an awful lot out of the file size. So now your file size may go from like 3 megabytes to like, you know, 500K, which is a huge reduction. But then the real art and the real work is in now looking at, now that you've lowered the number of pixels, now you have to figure out how many colors can I discard and still look good to the eye. Now we're in more of a subjective realm, right? Yeah, exactly. So
colors, you can't leave the colors behind.
well, there's some science behind this. For example, your typical monitor can display millions of colors, millions of different colors.
Yeah.
Your eye won't necessarily distinguish between millions of colors, right? You will get to a point where your eye won't notice any difference, and then you'll get to a point where your eye will notice difference. So you could go down from millions of colors to thousands of colors, and then maybe you're looking at the image and you don't see any difference. You put the two side by side, and Photoshop makes that easy, right? And then you bring it down more and more and more. And now you've got a couple hundred different colors. Now your eye is like, oh, I'm starting to see a slight difference in quality.
Is that
now,
a slider? Is that a slider as well, John?
Yeah, so let me pull that up. Let me launch Photoshop. This will take me, my Photoshop's not loaded. So while I'm talking without sharing my screen, I'm gonna load a few things. So I'm loading Photoshop and I'm gonna try to open up some image in it. So while that's happening, let me keep talking about the principles, and then we'll do it in Photoshop. So this is really subjective. Like, how many colors can you lose? And there's a trade-off, right? So if you're more concerned about the download speed, you're going to be less concerned about the visual quality, and you're going to accept maybe a slight amount of blurriness, maybe a slight amount of I lost some colors, right? Or if your site is more concerned with quality, maybe you are a visual artist, as some of you are, and maybe you're posting pictures of your work, and your trade-off might be a little different because you might not want that loss of quality. You might want to bring the file size down as far as you can, but once it hits where your eye can discern the difference, you stop and you back off. So maybe you're at that point. And for you, that means the images might be slightly larger. Now, for somebody else, they just have standard images. That's not the main content. They're not trying to sell their artwork or whatever. Their calculation would naturally be a little different, and they would err more on the side of download speed rather than the visual clarity and crispness and richness of the image. So I can't. There's no silver bullet like how big is too big, how small is too big. So that's how I try to couch that.
Okay.
But the principle is you really do want to bring the size down as much as possible.
Okay.
And that's really up to you. Now there are other calculations involved. What if you only have one image per page? Yeah, okay, so you can afford to have a few more pixels and a few more colors. What if you have 20 or 30 pictures on a page? Well, if you don't optimize those and they're all really large, then you are going to have a very slow loading page, and people on a phone are going to be like, I don't like this website, and so forth. So there are these trade-offs, and that's what they are. They're really trade-offs. So it's in part value judgment. So the science will take you so far in terms of, you have to reduce pixels and colors. Those are the two factors, really. It's pixels and colors. The reducing pixels is pretty straightforward. It's the reducing colors where most of the subjectivity comes into play. Because you can reduce the size of an image down to the size of a postage stamp if you want. You'll get lots of savings in size, but that doesn't really work, right? So the size is one thing, but it's really about color reduction. Now, in a JPEG, that works differently than a GIF or a PNG. So I'm going to share my screen.
I have to get something off the stove. I'll be right back. So
okay.
While you're doing that.
This will take me a minute to get an image into Photoshop. Some reason, I'm not sure it's sharing. Can you see my Photoshop? I'm not sure you can see it.
Yes, yes.
Oh, good. Okay, good. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see Photoshop.
Let me start with a raw image from a camera or a phone camera. Let's see, where do I have some photos? Okay.
Okay, I'm back.
You're back from the stove already?
I am.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to bring in an image. Let's see how big this image is raw. One of the problems with sharing your screen is I've got all these other windows. I have two monitors, and I don't know how people can live without two monitors these days. But it also makes things more complicated when I have all these things open. Okay, here's an image. It's 5 megabytes. It's 5.2. The raw size of this, it's a 5.2 megabyte image from a digital camera. It's a pool at Fall Creek. It's a secret pool that only some people know about. Okay, so here's a digital image, 5 megabytes, right? Now, the first thing I do is I look at oh, why do I have a text layer on that? Where'd that come from? Let me just get rid of that layer. That shouldn't be there. I must have hit a button. Okay, so here's my image. I'll double click on this to rename it from background so I can edit it a little. Okay, so this image, if I go to image size is 4,600 pixels wide. Well, that's way larger than I need to use it. In fact, if I view it, it's normal size. It's just like way off the charts too big, right? So we know that that's way too big physically, right? So the first thing I say, okay, image size, I'm going to reduce the number of pixels. Maybe I'll make it 500 pixels wide, you know, just ballparking, right? Now, when you do that in Photoshop, by the way, that's not really what it looks like. If I go back here and say, where's my view? Actual pixels, it's really that big. Okay, so that's a good, okay, yeah, all right, 500 pixels wide, that's a good size for an image on my webpage, according to me. So now the real work is color reduction. So in some versions of Photoshop, like the old CS6, which I'm still using, because it's the last version before the subscription, so I don't see any need to keep updating, except I have to for Cabrillo, but right now I'm not, because this works fine. So under this version of Photoshop, Save for Web is under File. Under new versions of Photoshop, it doesn't work that way. To get to Save for Web, it's a little more hidden. You have to go to File, and somebody with a newer version help me. I think it's File, Export, and then Legacy. Or is it File, Legacy, then Export? It's one of those. So under the File menu in Photoshop, I think it's Legacy, Export, or Export, Legacy. But wherever it is, you're looking for Export and Legacy, and then you'll see Save for Web. And you go to Save for Web. And Save for Web opens the window where you do most of your reduction work. Now, the nice thing about the way Photoshop does it is it gives you on the left, the original, and on the right, the one you're manipulating. So you can compare side by side the visual quality. Now, right off the bat, it defaulted to showing me on the right a GIF, but I know that I want to be in the JPEG realm because it's a photo. And if it's a photo, you're gonna be working with JPEG because that's the most efficient photo format. Now, with JPEG, I get these low, medium, high, very high, maximum, really gross settings of quality. They just translate into a number. So medium, Photoshop says, is the number 30 under quality, right? The way that the JPEG format defines quality is a scale of 0 to 100, 0 being the lowest possible quality and 100 being the highest, which translates into the numbers of distinct colors in the image. Now, it won't give you a chart of all these colors the way the GIF and the ping reduction works, and we'll look at that in a second. But this just gives you a relative scale. So really, all you're doing is setting a number, and you could type the number in under quality, you could use a slider bar, or you could use those drop-down menus to approximate, but you're really just translating to a number. It all comes down to what number are you picking. So if I go all the way down to 0, right, then that is really low quality compared to the one on the left. Quite frankly, it doesn't look, even at 0, it doesn't look that bad to me. Now, if I magnify it, I'll see some
distortions or something.
Yeah, let's see if you see the difference here now when you magnify. You see that what we call artifacts of the JPEG.
Oh, I see.
You see that?
Yeah.
You see how it's in box, these little squares?
Right.
The JPEG algorithm actually looks at groups of pixels that are in these little square regions, and then within each square region, it does some reductions, and kind of your eye blends this together, right? This is all about optical illusions, really. You're tricking the eye to see color that might not even be there. So, so I might decide, maybe I'll go to medium. You see it now, there's virtually no, well, there's some, I can see a little difference, but again, I'm magnifying it. So if I go back and not magnify it, to me, to my poor eyes, I mean, I don't really see that much difference. And so I go, okay, even what they're saying, the medium level, that might be fine. I might go back to low, not 0, but low, which is a number 10 of 100. And I might say, you know what, that looks fine to me. Now, again, your calculation might be a little different. You might go a little higher. But certainly, you're going to be in the low to medium range here in what Photoshop calls low to medium. And look at that, 25K. You see that there? 25K. The original 732K, that's after I did the size reduction, going from 5 megabytes down to 700K. to 700,000.
Oh.
So now by reducing the color, I go down to 25K. And I go, yeah, okay, that's it, save, right? So that's essentially what you do. Now, that's an incredible color reduction. I mean, a size reduction. 25K is a really nice size for an image of that size, right? An image that's that big. So I could save it at that. So that's what I'm talking about. That's what you go through. Now, that's a manual process for one image. Now, if you have hundreds of images, you have a gallery site, you have lots of images, maybe you don't want to do that on every image because you just don't have that kind of, you don't want to do every one like that. Well, you can batch process images with a number of programs. Photoshop's batch processing is limited but works fairly well. I'm on a Mac. I use a program called Graphic Converter, which is shareware, and it's probably 60 or 70 bucks. I don't really remember. But I do a lot of image work because I have I have a side business, the Comic News, and we publish online as well as print. So we went to press the other day. I'm pretty exhausted, but so I do a lot of image manipulation, usually with cartoons, which is a little different because you're going to be in the realm of not JPEG, but you're going to be realm of GIF or PNG. So GIF or PNG, it's a different situation because you get this index of colors and you can literally pick the number of colors in the image. Look at how it affects it. Now, again, I wouldn't do this for a JPEG norm. I mean, you can save a photo. You can save a photo as a GIF, and you normally wouldn't do that. The only reason you might want to save a photo as a GIF or a PNG is because you want transparency somewhere in the photo. But generally, that's not a factor, so it's always JPEG. But if you have images that are not photo images, and they're more like line art, pen and ink, they have fewer colors, more sharp defined edges, no gradations of color, no rainbow-like effects, then you can get away with using PNG or GIF rather than JPEG, and you'll get better you'll get better compression of the file size. But if your image has continuous tone, grayscale, rainbow-like things, lots of different colors, fuzziness, then JPEG is really, we're talking about photos, JPEG is the way to go. But if you're not in the JPEG realm, now you have more control over your color reduction down to the number of colors. And so I could say, hey, I only want 4 colors in this image. Well, there you've got only 4 colors in the image. Of course, sometimes you do that for effect. Sometimes you might do that for some kind of visual effect. Maybe you're making a rollover effect. So you're going to show the images like that and you roll over them and they get a higher quality, whatever. Maybe you're doing buttons out of the images. So there are reasons you might want to do that kind of play. But generally speaking, that would be too few images, too few colors.
Yeah.
So if it's not a photo, you can go in here and you can actually, whether it's GIF or PNG, you can go in here and you can set the number of colors manually, and you can watch the difference. You can even selectively delete colors from the palette or selectively lock colors in the palette that do not go away as you reduce colors with these little icons down here. So, so especially if you're working on a corporate logo and, it's IBM blue and they have a certain hue of blue, it's a certain Pantone color or a certain hexadecimal web color, and you don't want that value to go away, then you could go in here, you could say, I'm going to lock that color. It's that color there. And you can click on this lock and it locks it so that when you go down to fewer colors, it's still there. And you don't lose that particular hue. Likewise, you could selectively delete colors. So, so you do get a lot of control in the optimization of PNGs and GIFs, but not in JPEG. JPEG is just a slider bar number. It's just a number you type in. It's just a number. That's all the JPEG value is. It's a number. And so that's color reduction in a nutshell. So how small is too small? How big is too big? Again, it's a kind of a, you eyeball it. It's a visual process. Now, if you're going to do batch reduction, then you're going to come up with something generally that works for your images, and then boom, do them all at once. Certain exceptions is if I have a photograph and let's say it has a road sign in it, or it has a storefront with a sign in it, if it has type in it, like, no parking or yes, we're open or something, if there's a sign in the photograph, then you will notice that you don't want it to get too blurry. And so with those kinds of photographic images where there's certain detail that you want to stand out in the photo, then you have to be careful about the reduction. but most of the time you can get away in a JPEG with really pulling that slider bar all the way down as far as you can get, as far as you can stand it. And then your image is well optimized. So that's a long answer to a short question, but that's kind of
Thank you.
the more full answer that I think gives you the understanding of how you want to approach it. And it's, and
Okay.
again, the mindset, you know, and I can tell you, working with people who come into the web more recently, who are more steeped in visual print design, they tend to err more on the side of larger image file size. People who don't have that background, I was going to say baggage, who don't have that background, I have that background in baggage, by the way. It took me years to kind of change my mindset, because I've been doing web work for 25 years. But, and I came out of print design. But it is a function in part of your mindset, and how long you've been doing web versus print, I've noticed, is a factor. So it's always good to look at your own biases and mindset when you're doing design work. And so keep in, you know, one of the things I talk about in some of my other classes is sometimes I start a class with, what is the difference between art and design? And to put that conversation, which I really like to play out in a class, in a nutshell, let me just short circuit that conversation. Design is more about the other. You can do art for yourself, self-expression, for no reason at all, or for other people. But when you do design, if you're designing, and if it's inherent in the word, if you look up the word design, what it really means, sign is the, I can't, the root of sign, the etymological root is about yourself. It's about a person, like sign, signature, identity, you. Design is not about you. It's about the other that you're designing for. When you design for the other to use your work. So it's not about you. In art, it's more about you. In design, it's not about you. It's about who's using what you're putting together. Who's using your work? Who's looking at your art? Who's using your website? Who's navigating it? Who's waiting for the page to load? So you really want to keep that in mind. It's not all about you. It's about the person, the user that you're designing for. So there is an essential difference in my mind between art and design, and that's it. Who's your audience? And so again, keeping your audience in mind, you want to be considerate and of their bandwidth plan, of their time, and of their eyes, and of the quality. So it's a balancing act. Okay, I'm going to shut up now. And do you have more questions on that?
No, I think you know, I've had to come a long way myself, because I came out of art school, you know, thinking art was religion, and that was it, and there was no compromise with design. You did, you know. So I've come out of that, but I've also done graphic design, and you know, a lot of it. So
right,
yeah.
but,
So
and even in graphic design, if you're in the print world, it's still 100% about the visual quality, right? I mean, in print, there's also, the smell, the tactile, you can feel, you know, but it's really, you know, 95%. How good does it look? And that's how you define quality. And on the web, I would argue that's half the equation.
Yeah.
And another portion of the equation is, how fast does it load?
Yeah.
Is the site usable? Then we get into areas of navigation and so forth. But in terms of the images themselves, it's really a balance between the two factors. How good it looks, how fast it loads. And the idea of speed is a new concept, right, in design.
Right.
So,
can I add one thing to that for myself? Because
absolutely.
I have no background that any of these people have. I have the user background. And for me, I don't want to be distracted by what I'm looking at on the screen. I want to be able to look at it and see, okay, that's pretty. Do you need to have the definition? Is that the purpose of that picture? Because if it takes a long time to load and it's not the thing you need to look at, then it slows down my ability to use the site. So you kind of have to think of, why is the picture there? Is it there because that's the focus? You want someone to really look at that picture, then that makes sense to make it a little more high definition. But if I'm, you know, if I'm just looking for something online, if it's not about the photo, then the photo almost gets in the way to some extent. You don't want to look at a page that just this text. That's true, but you also don't want to annoy the person who's trying to use your site. So
Mhm.
that's just my take. That's the user view.
Thank you. That's valuable.
Well, it just, think about when you're doing a search and what types of searches that you're doing
Yeah.
and the sites that you visit. I know for myself, looking a lot of these templates, they're so minimalist that I almost feel like there's just way too much white space here. It's almost wasted. You need a certain amount of that just to keep people's eyes from hurting. And I remember when John was talking about the history of the internet and when everybody discovered you could make things move around on the screen. And my husband and I kind of went, oh my God, dancing baloney. Because it's like, it was more like, oh, look what we can do versus how does that help sell whatever it is I'm trying to sell. So.
Absolutely. And to give you a print equivalent of that, way back in the 80s, if you were going to design a flyer or something to be printed or a magazine or anything, generally you had to use professionals who had more experience in design. So for example, you would give your copy to a typesetter who would typeset it, and then you would get the galleys back and so forth. And so then, PageMaker and the laser printer came out, and all of a sudden the field of quote desktop publishing emerges, and now everybody's a publisher, everybody's a designer. And you remember the flyers you used to see with like 5 different fonts and just awful design, and just like, because everybody's a designer now, who needs to be trained? I can make a flyer myself, I don't have to go to the typesetter. And there was that same phase when the web hit. And people were like, oh, wow, I can have animated GIFs. And, you had the link that would say, send me email, little mailbox, and the letters spinning around and going into the box and spinning around and going into the box, spinning around and going into the box. You're like, I don't really, that's cute, but okay. It's cute for like 2 seconds. And then it's annoying. And so there were lots of all these little animated GIFs that were cute, dancing bears and whatever. And it was like, it's just eye candy. That's great. But, I'm not 5 years old. I don't need to look at that. I go to the page for information.
Yeah.
And so again, your audience, for me, it's about speed. It's almost entirely about speed. If I go to a page and it takes literally more than like 3 or 4 seconds before it's loaded, I'm clicked onto the next site. I just like, if I'm searching for something, I don't have that that's a waste of my time. And so maybe some big, beautiful image is loading. That's great. But no one's going to see the big, beautiful image if it takes too long to load, because they're gone.
Right.
So that's part of that balancing act. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And again, it does, and in terms of design, it really is a mindset shift.
Mm-hmm.
It really, and it takes a while. It took me years, and I know it takes some of my students at least a semester or 2 to make the shift of really thinking more about the user on the web than how good they want their work to be presented to the world. And I get there's some ego in that, and there's some professionalism in that, and that's all fine. But it's just, you have to balance all the factors, and there's context. So as I mentioned, some of the different factors in the context of who you're designing for and so forth. So no clear-cut answer, but you should be aware of the trade-offs. I want to say one more thing on this, and this gets a little more into the weeds that we're not going to be able to get into in this course, but you should be aware that the web has evolved quite a lot on this idea of how to deal with image quality. And in the past, you really didn't have as many options. You had the options I just outlined in optimizing your image. But now we have more options, which are part of the field of what's called responsive web design. So that you can literally take an image and save that image, just as I did here, at 3 different sizes physically, right? So I could save one at 300 pixels wide, one at 500 pixels wide, and one at 700 or 800 pixels wide of the same image. Or maybe the smaller image is cropped because that's the one that's going to be shown on a phone, and we don't need all the things around the person's head, or depending on the image, whatever. But essentially, you do 3 different images, and then one is used for the phone, one is used for smaller screens such as tablets or large phones, and one is used for desktop. And the web now has the technology to do that. So the browser can basically choose which one to download based on the size of the window or whether it's an iPhone or whatever other factors. And that's called responsive images. It's one part of what we call responsive design for the web. And so the field of responsive images has grown because now the technology supports that. The new browsers that most people use support that. The standards support that in HTML and CSS. And so you can take it a step further, and that, so if you have an image heavy site, and if you want to take it a step further, you can actually prepare 3 different images for the same image, upload 3 different images, and then the browser, based on the context, the environment that the user's in, the browser will choose the most efficient image. And that's a newer development, but now the browsers support that. That goes a little above and beyond the scope of this class. However, there are plugins for images that do make use of that technology, but that is another shade of gray, so to speak, in terms of when you're evaluating things. If you want to go to that level of detail, it's something you should be aware of, and that's called responsive images. And so things are, this technology is developing very quickly. The web moves very fast, so things that I say today might not be true in 5 years. Things I said 5 years ago are not true now. But the principles of design are still the same. The principles of color reduction, and I just went through, those are the same. They're not going to go away tomorrow. But some of the technological improvements in how the web and browsers work is affecting this. So I want to add that other caveat that somebody we are for the future, things are going to keep changing in this realm.
Okay, thank you. That's a really clear answer. Thanks.
Okay, so other questions, problems you're having? Are you running into showstoppers, theme not working, a plugin you're having trouble with?
I had a question.
Yeah.
I was using a plugin to do my sitemap, and
Uh-huh.
all of a sudden I discovered a sort of new thing in the WordPress world, this concept under posts of categories. And I don't know anything about blogging or posting or any of this. Well, could you talk a little about categories? Absolutely.
So do you want to share your screen? Do you have your site up, Ann?
Sure. So I've now made categories. I didn't have them before.
Okay, so so let me start general and get specific. I'd like to start in the general and bring it down the funnel.
So do you want me to go to the sitemap I created?
Actually, why don't you go to one of your blog pages with a post. So one of the differences between what's called a page and a post or a post page is the fact that you can have these blog posts categorized. Now, if you are creating a blog post, you will notice that you can give it a category. So, Ann, did you say you had in some of your posts categories?
Yeah, I made them all categories now.
Okay, why don't you
you wanted lots of pages, so it's like, okay, well, this seems to make, and I discovered this inadvertently. I'll go back to my sitemap and you can see what it did when it did it.
Okay, so go to one of your pages. Exactly. There you go. Go to one of your blog posts there.
Here.
Any of them. Yeah. So now, if you scroll down somewhere, it's going to say what the category is. Depending on how your theme shows it, and most of them will show the category.
It does here, right there.
Yeah. So categories. Okay. So this is a feature of WordPress that's really powerful. So when you create a post, if you can go to your edit, why don't you go to the edit mode for that post? When you create a post, you can assign it one or more categories. Now, if you don't assign it a category, it's going to be what's called the category of uncategorized. So it always has a category, even if it has an uncategorized category.
I couldn't remove the category because I had wanted just a post that was an introduction to posts.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't ever get that off, so I had to create a category called all posts and put posts underneath of it.
Well, you can create
I
as
can
many
pretty-
categories as you want and as general or specific as you want them to be. So whenever you create a blog post, you can assign it a category that's pre-existing, as you have here 3, or you can always add a new category and assign it to that. And you can have the same post can be in all the categories. I mean, it depends on how you define your categories and what it falls under. Now, the reason that this is really powerful is that it allows the user. Remember the user? We talked about the user a little earlier. It generally allows the user to search through different kinds of categories of posts to see the things that they're most interested in. It also gives you some interesting options too, I'll mention in a minute. But in terms of the user, they can go in and, like, if you go back now to your the page that the user sees, and it will show the category. They can click on the category, and then it should show them a list of other posts in that category. Now, your sitemap is just doing that by itself too. So
Sorry. Oop. I don't know what I just did.
categories are very fluid. You can always create new categories. You can always reassign things. You can always go in and change things you've assigned to your posts. So you're not fixed. Nothing is fixed in stone. You can always change them.
Okay, so here, when I hit this, it brings me to this category page.
Exactly. But see what I'm saying?
Oh.
When you're looking at the post and if you click on the category, it's going to show you the posts in that category. That's the way most themes will work.
It does. So
Right.
here's the 2 posts in that category.
Right. So now you can use this in a navigation way to your advantage. You could actually instead of, pardon me?
Change my navigation, so I created submenus.
Exactly. And so you can use the categories as essentially menu items, so that it makes it really easy for people to see things that are grouped together under certain principles or categories. So it's a very powerful feature.
That way, because I didn't want tons of menu items.
Yeah, well, that's up to you as to how you want to do your menus. Each theme is going to do that differently. The drop downs, to me, they get a little annoying after a few levels, but everybody's different. And so the categorization is a powerful tool, and your sitemap tool was just leveraging on that to create at a glance a list of the different posts in the different categories. So that's kind of cool. It's a nice sitemap plugin. Which plugin is that?
What?
Yeah. Which plugin is that? What's it called?
Oh, I'd have to go back and check.
But that's a nice little sitemap plugin.
Since we had to, we need a lot of plugins. I've been trying to fish around and find.
Well,
plugins.
see, and you can feed 2 birds with 1 crumb, because you both satisfies the requirement of a sitemap page as well as using a plugin.
Right.
So it's
so
handy.
some of my plugins are absolutely ugly, and they'll go away really rapidly, like the calendar things and the dates and all of that stuff. But I've been adding them. Some of them have been very useful, like the yellow pencil. And this thing was like, bam! I had a sitemap. It's
exactly.
WP sitemap.
Nice. WCP.
And if I go, that's where it actually is in use. And then if I go to plugins.
Now, what that also does, by the way, is it forces you to clean up your act in terms of, oh, now you got to think about, did I accurately assign categories to my posts, right?
Yeah, and what I did is, since they didn't have it, I had to then create what they would be, what they would be under. Kind of, and it's helping me organize my site, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously not the pages side of it.
Yeah, because now pages it doesn't apply to. This is an essential difference, of course, posts and pages. And pages are static, and so they're not going to have categories. They're not going to have comments. They're considered just kind of there. They're static. The blog posts, the posts are very different. Mm-hmm.
Here it is right here. It's the WP sitemap.
And do they give you any kind of configuration options, like to not show the category section or stuff like that? Sometimes.
Let me go back in. It's
my guess is if it's a good one, it gives you some options to turn on and off things like that.
It's under here. Puts it under settings. Which
right.
strange. I had to look
They
for
all
it.
do different, yeah, all the plugins do weird things.
Yeah, you can see, you can,
Mhm.
here's the things you can pick. And then if you go
Mhm.
into how to use, I think that on my first page of all posts, I can actually put another sitemap for just my categories. So
Nice.
display the categories. And I was thinking I would do that on the first page of my all posts that would have a sitemap kind of all my categories.
So that's a good plugin. So folks, that's WP Sitemap. Nice one. I like that.
And you just, whatever you find you want on that page, you just copy that text and paste it in. So, you know, you can display only pop-ups, you can display only galleries. You know, it's even on you can make a gallery page and then have, okay, here's a list of all my galleries.
Now, in terms of getting back to categories, this is something that you might want to look at when you're looking at your theme. Some themes will emphasize them more than others. So with some themes, they might even kind of default to emphasizing the different categories you have on your homepage, for example. And some might not even show that. So it's something to be aware of. And again, themes determine an awful lot, as do plugins as well. You know, themes and plugins determine most of your site's look and feel and functionality. So seeing how they deal with categories is a good idea. There are, you could also have categories that, well, you're really not limited on what you can make into a category. So you've got a lot of flexibility.
One thing I found though, the categories page that it automatically creates, I think is really ugly.
Which,
So,
are you talking about your sitemap plugin automatically
no,
create?
no, no. When
Or
you
your
go
theme?
here,
Your
when I
theme.
go here and actually go to one of those,
So this is your theme. It's a function of your theme.
yeah, you go
Yeah.
here and this is the galleries page it creates. There it is. That this is sort of a really ugly page, I think, kind of. This was gigantic and white and just a different color, and it was.
How does it look? How does it look on a phone? How does it look when you scroll, when you compress that page down to in terms of the width?
It's probably pretty ugly because I used it with yellow pencil and I didn't buy it, so it
So
changed
go all the
it.
way down in terms of one, you know, go down as wide as you can, as little width as you can, and now take a look at it. Many times, you know, because things don't look as bad that way. You see, now it looks fine. In other words, you know, it's not that ugly. It's just,
And it does.
it's kind of plain.
Where you have to find where to put that picture.
Mm-hmm.
So the picture is where you have on each page.
So is this like what the theme calls a featured image or something like
Yeah,
that?
and then it pulls that out. So I actually did do it on one.
It looks pretty straightforward. This is the way a lot of them look on a phone. Remember that, you know, if you're not a person who looks at a lot of web pages on a phone, periodically you do want to look at your site on a phone because, you know, it's radically different than a large desktop screen. And you just want to make sure it's looking good enough for you on the phone.
And the menu doesn't work on there.
The menu doesn't work?
No, because under all posts, I have more. Oh, yeah, I have more stuff under that menu item. If you go up to the large.
I wonder why that doesn't work.
So, you know, on this, because it expands out and then expands, you didn't see this submenu.
Oh, right. Those don't, okay, so when you have, okay, so interfaces are different, right? You've got two essential interface differences you want to be aware of. One is obviously screen size. The functionality changes on a phone, especially in terms of, you know, are the buttons big enough for your fat finger to find and so forth. But the other is the difference between using a mouse and using a finger or a touch interface. And those drop downs work okay with a mouse, usually. How they work on the phone is going to be, or a tablet in a touch interface is going to, it has to be different. So in other words, when you, instead of hovering a mouse over something to see a drop down, you're going to tap. And then when you tap, does it work the same way? Does it fly out, or does it just go further down vertically and open up a vertical menu? You know what I'm saying? So the interface on the phone sometimes is a bit different than on the screen in terms of menuing. So looking at how your menu works on the phone, when, especially when you have more complex flyouts and drop downs, see how that works on the phone. If you tap the item, do the other ones open up like an accordion underneath, very easy to use? Do they not? I mean, like what happens when you tap it with your finger? Yeah, see, that's more of a finger tap, see? And then when you tap portfolios, you're going to see more under that, right?
So
So,
I see one, and I think here I'm going to have a menu anyway.
mhm.
I'm going to put a sitemap menu that you can get all the other posts by category.
Right.
So you could access it this way if you were doing it, because this is just describing why I'm making posts or something.
Yeah, it's not a bad theme.
Hey, John.
Yes, who said that?
This is Amanda.
Hi, Amanda. How are
Hi.
you?
Good. Since you're talking about categories, can you also touch on tags, tagging posts and whatnot?
Yeah, it's essentially the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it has it broken into like different categories on that edit page that Anne was just on. And I guess I'm not totally clear on why they're separated and what the I mean, I know how to use them, but I'm not clear why there's separation like that.
Separation. I'm sorry, Ann.
Where do you see the tags here? I'll open it back up again.
It's under when you go to like the edit page, and you can add your categories.
Okay, let me go there.
Below it, it says tags. So if you just hit,
Sorry, I'm trying to find my dash again.
that's okay. You squished it.
Yeah, it's harder to use. This is a really tiny laptop, so trying to get things to. Okay, so my my categories are here, right here, under right there, tags. Oh. So what does this do?
Where are you at?
Under posts, you have category posts, categories, and tags. So I just opened up tags, and I got to this fill in the blank place here.
Well, tags are kind of a subcategory. Categories are just that. They're just categories that your information fits into. Tags are kind of more specific under a category. So that's, I guess, how I would define the difference. Tags are more specific.
Okay.
So they're kind of like, in a sense, subcategories. It's kind of like confuses people, kind of the same way like people are confused between plugins and widgets. And widgets are kind of a plugin.
And
they're a specific kind of plugin.
Yeah, and pages and posts.
Pages and posts confuse everybody.
Yeah.
What are the categories actually for? I'm really confused by like, why bother?
Well, you don't have to. You know, if you have a small blog and you don't have a lot of posts, and all your posts are on the same general topic, that, you know, you probably have less need to differentiate them. But on a larger site with like lots and lots of blog posts over time, you might want to make it easy for somebody to say, I only want to see posts on, you know, whatever, maybe you are an artist, right? And you've got your paintings. Maybe you also do drawings. Maybe you also do Adobe Illustrator work, you know. And so maybe you've posted these different kinds of things, and you've categorized them, and somebody's only interested in seeing or reading about your paintings as opposed to your sketches. So they could just go and click on the category of paintings and see all the stuff you've written about paintings and not read the other stuff. So it gives the user a way to filter. It's like a filter system. It gives them a way to filter the other stuff out that they don't want to scroll through.
Okay.
When I discovered this last night, it seemed like a great organization tool, because part of what I've been kind of toying with or wondering about is the majority of my printmaking is about dealing with deep space in the universe. But every time I take the train or travel or do other stuff, my photography gets off into other ventures. So to be able to do like a travel and photography section that dealt with that sort of part of my life and that artwork, it's like, oh, I can just stick that under a different category and then write about that conceptual part of that. And if you didn't want to go there, you wouldn't have to.
I see. Uh-huh. Okay.
And
That
also, to get back to the categories, tags difference, think of categories as broad, think of tags as keywords. So you might want to think of tags as keywords for keyword searches. That's probably the way they're generally used the most.
Because you can, down here where on the screen she's on, it says slug. So you can do a slug.
Yeah, and that's a little different. And as it says there, it says the slug is the URL-friendly version of the name. It's usually all lowercase, contains letters, numbers, and hyphens.
It just would show up in a search, I guess, is to your point.
And that's mostly what it's for. It's
Yeah.
for search engine optimization.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas categories are just broader, literally
if you're
categories.
looking for paintings about trees, if you have your tag and then slug is trees, when you do your search engine optimization, it would show up. Is that how that's supposed to work? Am I understanding that?
Well, search engine optimization is more like what Google chooses to focus on. But
Maybe
you
we're going
can,
too deep.
you can, oh, by the way, I didn't see this until I just looked at it, where the tags can be selectively converted to categories using the tag to category converter. I haven't used that, but I don't know how useful that would be, but that's interesting. I just noticed that. The search engine optimization oh my gosh, that's such a huge field, and there's so many factors. There are certain things you want to be aware of for basic search engine optimization. There are certain things that are a bit beyond your control, but what you can control very easily is putting text in your headlines, in your links, in your image descriptions, in your categories or tags that people might search on. And that is probably the easiest way to up your search engine optimization. So any text that's in the title of the page, I mean, literally the title, not the headline, but the title, that's probably the single most important place to have words that you think people will be searching on to find your site. Second to the title would be your H1, your main headline. And then your what the actual link text is on your pages. And then tags and categories for WordPress, for example. But it's really, tags are mostly about keywords. So, and that's mostly about search engine optimization. So where category is a little broader. I don't know if I'm explaining that right.
You could toss a bunch of those keywords down in this description box.
Yes and no. I wouldn't. Yeah, and as it says right under the box, the description is not prominent by default. Some themes may show it, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you put you have to be careful when you if you're consciously doing search engine optimization. You have to be careful not to overdo it, because if you overdo it, that will actually count against you rather than for you in terms of searches. Google has a very sophisticated algorithm. It's much, much, much more sophisticated than it used to be, 10 or 20 years ago, when people oh yeah, just put a lot of keywords in your text and, it'll work better in Google. And that doesn't really work anymore. So you want to be careful about just using that description box to load a bunch of keywords into it. Because Google will, Google's artificial intelligence algorithm will look and see if, you know, is this prose that makes sense, or is this prose that's just a bunch of keywords strung together to try to trick the search engines? And you want to be extremely careful not to be blacklisted, because what happens is Google thinks you're just throwing a bunch of keywords on your page to trick it. It will actually downgrade you, and it will have the opposite effect of helping you with any kind of search engines. So I would be really careful about the description. I mean, I know what you said. Oh, you just put your keywords in there. Yeah, to a certain degree, you could do that, but I would not go overboard with that, because you could get on the other side of that in terms of Google looking at your page positively or negatively. And SEO may not be important to you, and SEO may be very important to you, depending on if your goal is to sell a product and drive traffic. That's really different than if you're just, you know, publishing a personal journal or whatever. So be careful in the search engine optimization. It's tricky. But and on that topic, by the way, there's a misconception that homepages should be short. And the opposite is true if you're concerned with search engine optimization. You want a lot of text on your homepage, a lot, because your homepage is the most important page in terms of SEO or search engine optimization. Your homepage is the key page of your site. And the mistake many people make is they keep the content on their homepage short, and then somebody's, sorry, let me just sorry, I gotta go. Bye. She'll understand. The homepage should be one of the longer pages on your site. The mistake a lot of people make is they think that for some reason, and I think this goes back to a little bit of a print mindset. They heard somewhere that you should keep everything, quote, above the fold, when of course there's no fold on the web, but you know what I mean. And that's not true, because search engines need a lot of text to understand the page, and it gives you more of an opportunity to weave your keywords into the page without looking like you're padding it too much. So the mistake people make is they keep their homepage really short, and then they put all the essential information on like an about page or something. And that's the worst thing you can do for search engine optimization. You want a long homepage with lots of text, so that you can sprinkle your keywords in there without your keyword density being more than a few percent. If your keyword density is more than a few percent, Google will downgrade your page because it thinks you're trying to scam it. So keep that in mind as well. And keep that in mind when you're looking at themes too. Some themes have long home pages and some have short home pages. And a lot of that's up to you in terms of how much you put into it.
So we could just take a lot of that text that's from the about page that describes what it's about and just slam it into the homepage.
I would recommend that if you're concerned with search engine optimization. So a little side road, but on SEO, the first thing you want to do is decide what your keywords are. So you anticipate what you think people are going to search on who are going to find your site. So if your site is about, Joe's Garage, and you're an auto, repair shop, then people might search on auto repair or body shop or whatever it is that they're looking for. And then you want to say, okay, what are people going to search on? How can I sprinkle those keywords into my homepage without the keyword density being more than, let's say, 3 to 5% of all the words on the page? You go beyond 3 to 5%, Google's going to go, nah. And you need to sprinkle them in a prose sort of way, not in a bullet format way, a way that makes sense, that it looks like it's inherently naturally part of your content, rather than just you throw a bunch of keywords on that you think people are going to search on somewhere. Google's algorithm is very, very adept at catching keyword stuffing. So it's an art. And the longer the homepage, the more opportunity you have to sprinkle your keywords in without it looking like you're padding it too much. Hope that makes sense. I've got to go in a few minutes, so let me take some more questions. This is Wednesday. We'll meet again Friday, but I want to make sure that you have any outstanding show-stopping questions answered. Any problems you're having? Are you stuck somewhere? Do you need some troubleshooting help? Or if not, more general questions. These questions have been really excellent.
Good question,
I
John.
have a simple question, Clara.
Pardon? Hi, Clara. I didn't hear what you said.
Okay. I discovered that when I fill out the subscriber, my program, my WordPress doesn't have the box that say check and send an email to the subscriber. So my page doesn't have this box.
Are you talking about when you create the user?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so am I sharing my screen? Let me see if I can go in here. Let me share my screen. Let me get a web page.
John, do you have enough time to do this? I just was wondering, does it, you have a
Yeah, and then I'm
clock?
gonna have to stop. So I've got another
Okay, just
thing coming up
a
here.
minute.
Let me go to, why does it try to do that every time I click on that?
I have to leave. Bye.
Okay, bye. I'm going to do this in a few minutes and then we'll
Bye.
go. I'm going to log into a dashboard and take a look at, let's see. Oh, I'm in here. Okay. Let me see if I'm logged in. Ah. So what you're talking about, Clara, is that when you,
User,
pardon me?
yes,
So when you go to add a new user, is that what you're saying?
yes, yes. And in the end of the page, when I fill out all your information, the box that say, the box send user notification in my program doesn't appear this.
Are you saying you're not seeing this here?
No, the send user notification with the check.
Oh,
send
here,
an
you're
email.
not seeing this.
No, I just doesn't appear this. For that, I believe that I have to go to the tools, and the tools send to you the email, but not for this page.
It doesn't show up. It's supposed to show up.
In my page, not. So I don't know what happened. I have the very old.
I'm not sure why you're not seeing that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And so when you create, so you just don't see this at all. Do you see everything else like this?
Yes, I can see the username, email, first name, password, create a password, and then add new user, but not the check box.
I really don't know. I don't know why that is. I'll be honest with you. I
Yes, it's
don't
very
know.
strange. For that,
That's really,
yeah.
that's really odd. That's really interesting because that shouldn't change depending on your theme. This is something that's this should not change depending on your theme. So I'm not sure what that's about. Do you have an email address set in your settings?
Yes, I have my email. Yes.
Let me just.
I use the tools, and the tools, there are a place that you can send emails for the subscribers. in the tools, you go to tools, yes, and export personal data. Yes. Click
Yeah,
on.
this is odd. This isn't really
Yeah. I don't know.
interesting.
Yes, I sent to you for this way the same request because for the other page I didn't find how sent to you the email for.
Okay. Let me, okay, I'll be honest with you. I don't know why you're not seeing that on your page. It should be, it should show up here on your add new user. That box should be there. I don't know what that's about. I'm gonna have to investigate that further, but I do have to go now. But let me take a look at that, and we'll spend some time on that on Friday if I can figure it out.
Okay.
Okay, because in the
John,
meantime, yeah.
I just have a real quick question, which is there a way for us in Canvas, there was a way to see if our something we turned in had been viewed or graded, but I haven't found on your site a way to tell if you've been receiving my assignments.
Oh, thank you. That's what I'm behind in. You're right.
Okay.
That's my fault. I'll get to work on that. What I have is on the grades page on my site. There's supposed to be underneath that little chart, another chart with what you would normally see in something like Canvas, which says, yes, you did that full credit, no problem. Okay. And I haven't done that yet because it's one of those crazy things that I'm way behind in. But I will get on that right away.
Okay, it's just because I'm not sure whether you've received them or not because
I'm receiving
first I wasn't able. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
have you, I'm glad to see you. Have you been catching some of the other Zoom sessions?
I've been looking at it on YouTube. I have 2 kids at home and it's been crazy.
No
so.
problem. Because I'm glad to see that you're looking at them, and I hope your kids are doing well. I know it's crazy if you have kids at home. It's a long story, but anyway, yeah, thanks for reminding me. I'll get on that. But in the meantime, don't worry about it. Leniency is the order of the day here in terms of grading assignments. We've actually gotten specific instructions from the Vice President of Instruction at Cabrillo to be lenient because everybody's in, not only teachers, but students, and everybody's personal lives are crazy. And so we're all being, deadlines are kind of like, yeah, whatever. So we're all being very easy on this. And your other instructors hopefully are taking that advice from what the administration is telling us, be easy on everybody. This is an exceptional semester. And I'm sorry for that, but I'll get on that. But thanks for reminding me. I have to go, folks, but I will see you on Friday, or maybe I'll see some of you on Friday in the meantime.
What is the time for Friday?
Fridays, I think at 3.
3 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once in a while, because of all the meetings I have to be in, I have to reschedule something, but it should be Friday at 3 unless you get an email from me otherwise. And then Mondays and Wednesdays at 10. And I'm going to add some more sessions in the next 2 weeks. I'm going to have some sessions once a day for everybody, just because, when you're doing your projects, you're going to hit more questions. So I got to open up more sessions. I'll do that. But in the meantime, our next session will be Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, folks, stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you.